Welcome back to The Spark. I'm Asia Tabb. If you watch CBS 21's morning newscast, you already know Steve Knight as the meteorologist keeping central Pennsylvania up to date on the forecast. But outside of the weather maps and radar loops, Steve has another creative side that's been getting a lot of attention. His podcast, The Night Shift, where he talks music, artists, and stories behind the songs. And recently, that passion project earned some serious recognition, winning Best Podcast at the 2026 Central PA Music Hall of Fame. Joining us now is Steve Knight from CBS 21. In full disclosure, I've known Steve for a long time now. We actually used to work together back in my reporting days there. So this is going to be a fun one. Steve, I'm so glad you're here with us. Welcome to The Spark.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Asia. And it's nice for me to say, I knew you way back when.
You knew me way back when.
I knew you became such a big star here in Central PA. So I knew you way back when. But really good to see you, and thank you for having me on The Spark.
Same. This is going to be so much fun because this is interesting to me because you're on the other side of a microphone instead of in front of the weather map. What is that like for you right now?
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because that's part of the reason why I do the podcast that I do that I know you want to talk some about. But I started in radio. Some people still say that I have a face for radio.
That's so mean.
Yeah. But I started in radio a long time ago, late 80s. I was a disc jockey. And to be honest with you, Asia, for a while, I figured that's all I would do. I would be a disc jockey, and then career twists and turns and opportunities and that type of thing. And I wound up on the TV side of things, but I've always had a love for being behind the microphone. And I do appreciate, being heard and not seen. And I don't have any makeup on right now. So
let me tell you, it's lovely.
Yeah, things like that. I miss being able to just wear a T-shirt and shorts and be on the radio. But yeah.
Oh, come to this side,
Yes.
Steve. We'll make up a position for you here. So you were a disc jockey, but then you became a meteorologist at that, which there's a lot of training that goes into being a meteorologist. And there's still certifications that you have to reach every year. They can't see, but you're closing your eyes. So you're just like, yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. But did you ever think that you would come back to this side?
And do a podcast?
Well, yeah, because it's about music.
Right. Well, so when I started as a disc jockey back in the late 80s, Asia, I worked at a station here locally in Central PA, 92.7, Starview 92, for the older listeners that will remember it from way back in the day. But music's always been a big passion for me. And going out and seeing bands and just being involved and I've always just kind of been around the scene, been around the local music scene. I some contacts that I made even way back then are still around the scene. And so I was presented with an opportunity to do a podcast about a year and a half ago about something that I'm really passionate about, aside from CBS 21 and aside from being a meteorologist. And, so I was easily drawn back into doing something along those lines that is a little more casual and not quite as buttoned up as being on TV every day and standing in front of the green screen and giving the forecast.
Yeah, not seeing you with an IFB or a mic clip to you. Yeah, I'm just like, oh, this is different. Right. And you think you know a person. I worked with you for 2 years and had no idea that you had this background in radio or being a disc jockey.
Right. Well, the thing is, so as you know, when you get into the news business and you were, a reporter and I was a meteorologist. So we would see each other in passing, but we were on different shifts.
Yeah.
So we would see each other every once in a while. I remember a couple of times that you had called me and you were asking me a couple of questions about, because it was some kind of hyper local story. And you knew that because I'm ancient and I've been around this area forever, that you knew you could come to me and be like, so let me ask you about, the history of this and whatnot. But we didn't really travel in the same circles, even within the same building. And that's kind of the way the news business works, as you know.
Well, I knew I could come to you because I was someone that they stuck you with during my interview, and I got to know you. So I was just like, oh, he's really open. He knows a lot. This is great.
Yeah. When you came in for your interview, they brought you back to the Weather Center, and they kind of parked you next to me and said, okay, we'll just hang out with Steve for a little bit. And I knew what the purpose of that was.
Yeah.
Is that later on, after you went on and did some other things within the building that day for your interview, of course, the people that were interviewing you came to me and said, what do you think? What do you think of
well,
Asia?
thank you. I got the job.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You got the job. I passed you with flying colors. So, and here we are years later. So it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, for sure. So how did the idea of the night shift came about? You said you were presented with an opportunity with the Central PA Music Hall of Fame, but where did you get this idea that I'm going to call it the night shift and this is the direction I'm going to go? Because there's so many that you could have went, especially with music in the Central PA music scene.
Well, so in a nutshell, I was hosting a show at the West Shore Theater. A friend had reached out who has a band and said, hey, would you come down and, just kind of, would you help promote the show and come down and welcome people and just say, hey, good evening, everybody, Steve Knight, And they had also hired somebody to actually record the show, both, audio and video. And it was a company by the name of Moving Audio Imagery, which is run by a guy named Jeff Carley out of Marietta. And he then, I remember it's funny. I had gone to Las Vegas for the opening of the Sphere to see U2. That's how big of a music fan I am, okay?
All the way in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I went all the way to Las Vegas to see U2 at the Sphere. When the Sphere opened, this would have been, I guess, 2023, somewhere in there. And I was sitting in the Chicago airport flying back from Las Vegas, and I got a text from this guy from Moving Audio Imagery, and it was, Steve, I had this idea. I'd love to do a podcast. I'm building a studio in my house, and you'd be the perfect host for it. And my initial response was, I don't think I can. I don't think I have the time. I've got a lot of other things going on. Thank you, but I appreciate it. I'm flattered with the opportunity, but no thanks. And Jeff from Moving Audio Imagery, the way he likes to tell the story is that he pestered me. I like to tell the story that he eventually convinced me to do the podcast. And he did. He built a studio in his basement in Marietta at Moving Audio Imagery. And he finally just said to me, Steve, just come and see the studio that I built in my basement where I think we could do this podcast. Will you at least come and check out the studio? And Jeff, I'd gotten to know him a little bit, nice guy. Finally, I said, okay, I'll come and at least look at this. Well, I walked in and I looked at the studio that he had built in his basement. And about 10 minutes later, I was shaking his hand and saying, let's do it. Let's do this podcast. So, and in terms of the name, The Night Shift,
it's so catchy.
Well, it works. I did start thinking like, okay, so what would be a name? And I thought, well, the Steve's whatever. Years ago, there was a movie called Night Shift, and it had Henry Winkler in it, who's one of my favorite actors. And that movie popped into my head, and I went, The Night Shift. I did have the thought, Asia, believe it or not, that maybe it's a little pretentious to actually name it after myself. Like I could have just called it, Central PA Music or whatever, or the Music Files or the, whatever. But I thought, it is kind of catchy. I ran it past Jeff at Moving Audio Imagery. I said, I've got this idea. What if we call it The Night Shift? And he was like, absolutely. Perfect. And I was like, okay, then that's what we'll go with.
Well, it's so catchy. It's like your alter ego in a way. Because, because watching you on TV is one thing, but then like hearing the podcast and then also sitting across from you right now, we're talking music. Those are two different Steves.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely really, really fun for me because, as you know, when you're on TV and even, you can be yourself to a degree, especially me doing the weather. I let some of my own personality out and have opportunities to at least attempt to be kind of funny or, we do, funner stories. And my world isn't always gloom and doom. A lot of times I get to talk about, hey, it's sunny and beautiful. I'm the happy part of the newscast. But yeah, this does give me the opportunity, I think, for people to get to see a side of me that they quite frankly didn't know existed.
What type of conversations are you trying to have on the show, and who do you have on The Night Shift?
Well, we have had just a really, really great guest list so far of some real Central Pennsylvania legends, people like Shay Quinn. We've had Amy Simpson on. Just really sat down with Scott Frange. I can go on and on. The Jelly Bricks are coming on. I've got an episode with them that's going to be coming out very, very soon. And the whole goal of the podcast from the minute and we don't play music. Like we might have a band, like maybe do a quick live performance in the studio, but it is a conversation. It is, and there is no limit, time limit on the conversation. We start, and I usually say to the guests, we're going to go. And when it kind of feels right that we're done, then I guess we'll be done. And I just wrap it up. But everybody, Asia, has a story. You have a story, okay? If I sat down with you and I said, tell me about when you first had the idea that you would like to go into broadcasting and how did you wind up here? Trust me, it's an interesting story. Everybody's story. Everybody. You stop somebody in a grocery store and you just say, hey, what do you do and how did you wind up doing that? It's about telling people's stories. It's not about me. It really isn't. It's about bringing these guests on. And a lot of the guests that we have already have a built-in fan base here in Central Pennsylvania. And this is their opportunity to talk to their fans and talk to people who come and see them and pay money to see them, play shows and talk about what inspired them and why they do it and what some of their favorite music is and what they like to do in their free time and how they got to where they're at. And that's really the whole genesis of the entire thing with the night shift is getting guests on that have been around or even new to the local music scene and having them tell their story.
Do you find that there's a common thread between the artists that you have on the show, you hear their story, and then you learn why they create the music that they do?
Yeah, two things, two words immediately come to mind. One is passion. Anybody that's been out there, grinding it out, especially on a local level, or some of our guests, of course, got to a national level, but they're back now in Central Pennsylvania doing their thing. You have to be extremely passionate about it because there's a lot of big time ups and downs with the music business. The other thing too is, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, the great thing about music is that music is all about emotion. Emotion and music are so tied together. And I think a lot of times if you're having a bad day, you listen to a song that makes you feel better. Sometimes a song might take you to a place where you're a little bit sad, but music it's about the emotional connect that you have with the music. And, our guests are all universally extremely passionate about what they do. And they're very tied into their art. And they see music as just that, an emotional experience between themselves and either the crowd that's there live or the listener that's listening to their songs.
Who are some of the guests that you had on the show?
Well, like I mentioned, I could go on, but, we've had Brian Seneca. A couple that really come to mind, I got to mention Alex Lee Warner. He is just a phenomenal, you're nodding as if you maybe know Alex Lee Warner. Yeah, he's a phenomenal young guitar player he's still in high school. He's graduating this year. He's 17, and he is a phenom. Another young musician we had on by the name of Logan Bedard, and Logan has been out playing since he was 8 years old and is on the short list of best drummers here in Central Pennsylvania. Logan is, I believe, now 21, which, of course, to me, that's, that's fresh out of the womb if you're Steve Knight. But that's been really fun for me, too, is that I didn't want it to just be some of the older musicians in the area that I know and have gotten to know over the years. I definitely wanted to shift the focus to also having on some younger artists and some females as well. We've got Alexia Christian is going to be on here coming up soon from Mechanicsburg, who's got a great following, certainly younger. She's about your age, Asia, I think. So yeah, very, very young, at least in my world. But I wanted it to be diverse. It definitely spins more to the rock leaning of things because that's just kind of my background. But I'm looking forward to having country artists on. If somebody comes on and they're great at playing a violin and they have a following and they're more than welcome. So with that, I'll just say it's real easy to find us. You can find me at the Night Shift on Facebook. So any musicians out there that are local that are would like to come on and we keep the door open and for anyone and everyone. So
while you're doing storytelling through getting to know the artist, do you do any preparation or research before they come on the show?
Yes. That I think is a big part of it. I try not to do too much. Some of the guests, I may have a personal history with, or for example, I had Shay Quinn on And years ago, Shay was in a band called the Sharks, and they were really big here in Central PA. So for me to sit across from Shay and have him on my podcast as a guest, when as a 13-year-old, I stood in line for 2 hours outside of a club in Lancaster, an all-ages club, just to get in and see him and the Sharks play. For me, it's kind of like a little bit of almost like a fanboy experience to be around somebody that I've known and admired for a long time. So for somebody like that, I don't have to do a whole lot of quote-unquote show prep. But for some of the guests, yeah. I mean, I never want to go into it, and just kind of be like, and you are, and what do you do? I know you play guitar, but what do you like? Or so, and I listen to their music, and that's the biggest thing. Before I have a guest, is that I listen to their music, because I think I owe it to the guest to have some kind of a base point of what they've created musically. And so that's really important for me, is I spend a lot of time listening to their music before they come on. So I have an idea kind of already going into it about who they are and what they're into as a musician.
Do you, now that you have this podcast and it focuses on music, does it change the way that you listen to music? And I only ask from this point of view. Before, I was a multimedia journalist. So the way that things are edited and the way that things are shot, I have a different point of view. Like, finding a videographer for my wedding was frustrating, because when I would see some of the clips, I'm like, there's 1,000 jump cuts. Like, you can't edit my video. So I wonder, is it the same for you dealing with music?
Well, what I would say is I probably have a greater appreciation for the creativity and creating the music and producing the music. We recently had on Michael Waskovich from MDW Productions, and he is a producer. He's basically somebody that while a musician himself, that musicians go to, and he helps them create their records and their recordings. And from that end of it, I've gotten a lot more knowledge in, what goes into. It's one thing to have an idea for a song. If you're a songwriter or a local musician, it's a whole nother thing to actually be in the studio and laying down the tracks and recording it and literally creating your art. And I think from that standpoint, I do listen to music now with probably a little bit more of a different ear, or maybe even a more refined ear, with a greater appreciation for the hard work that goes into from what's written on a page to actually coming out of the speakers.
We also have big news here. Congratulations. You have been named Best Podcast at the 2026 Central PA Music Hall of Fame. We love them. We had them on the Spark a few times. Yeah. What was that moment like for you? Did you know it was coming?
No. I mean,
you're so modest.
No, of course I didn't. I mean, I was, we were one of, 10 nominees in the category. And a good friend of mine who also has a podcast, not only was he there, he was nominated, but he was sitting right across from me. So literally across the aisle, I could have reached out and touched him. So, I went in with very muted expectations. It was our first year of having the podcast. Everybody says, it's an honor to be nominated. It really was. I would have been perfectly okay with just being nominated. I was very excited to be nominated. And then once you get the nomination, and once you get there, and then they actually call your name and you get the award, I'm not going to lie, it was a very humbling experience. The awards themselves, Asia, were in Lancaster at the American Music Theater, about 10 minutes from where I grew up in Lancaster County. So as I was walking up on stage to accept that award in front of the crowd, and people were, I kind of getting goosebumps now even talking about it, and people were applauding. That's one thing I thought of was, man, about 10 minutes from here on a 20-acre farm, I used to sit in my bedroom and passionately listen to music. And if you would have told me then that at 55 years old, I'd be walking up in front of this crowd in Lancaster accepting this award, I would have said, you're nuts. So it was really cool. And thank you to the Central Pennsylvania Music Hall of Fame. It's what an honor.
What's it like having a passion project that grows into something this significant to where you win Best Podcast?
Asia, that is a great question. That is one of the best questions I have ever been asked. That's all it ever was a passion project. Full disclosure, I'm not doing this for money. We don't have sponsors. This is literally a passion project, something that we just do because we care about the scene. We care about promoting the local scene in Central Pennsylvania, and we love giving the artists a voice. And so to see it go from that and to actually get an award for it, same thing with TV. I do not put in for the Emmy Awards, okay? I don't care about awards. All right. Awards, they make a nice paperweight. I mean, I don't do it for awards. I've always said, the best award that you can get is the People's Choice Award. When people come up to you and they say, we like you, you do a good job, we watch you, that's enough for me, okay? So to actually get this award, and it's one of those awards that other people nominate you for, you don't have to put in for it, you don't have to apply. Other people just put your
Nominate
name forward.
you.
Yeah. So it was really, really special, and I'm not going to lie, myself and Jeff and Ben Shoemaker at Moving Audio Imagery, extremely proud of winning that award. And to go from, hey, let's just do this to promote the industry and something that we all love to actually being recognized in that way is it's just phenomenal.
That's Steve Knight from CBS 21 and host of the award-winning podcast, The Night Shift. It's always interesting to see how people balance different passions. And of course, congratulations again on the recognition at the 2026 Central PA Music Hall of Fame.